and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
You want the good news or the bad news first? The bad news is that Taiwan voters voted overwhelmingly to say no to same-sex marriage, but the fight is not over there.
No, it's a little complex. We'll, of course, give you all the details. Finally got those referenda. But better news from Bermuda, which has been ordered by yet another court to restore marriage equality, although that's not over either.
A transgender migrant fleeing persecution in Honduras died of neglect and a beating in ICE custody. This was back in May, while the United States is now gassing toddlers at the border.
Why would anyone want to come to this country?
I was thinking
the real
about
question.
that.
Yes.
I was thinking about that.
And we have the Trump administration pushing the Supreme Court to peremptorily affirm its ban on transgender troops.
The Thanksgiving parade got its first lesbian kiss, and we're going to recall an earlier liberation of the event.
December 1st, this Saturday, is World AIDS Day. We'll give you some details on not only some stories, but some events.
And on December 14th, you'll all be able to see Katie Lang's concert of Ingenue on PBS, and other times that PBS decides to run it.
And we will show you singer Shawn Mendes talking about the rumors that he has a sexual orientation that is homosexual.
And a Gay USA exclusive on Barry Manilow.
Yes, leftover from our great guest Rob Shooter last week. More when we get to that at the end of the show.
But we start in Taiwan. Now, what happened in Taiwan? The court ordered them last year to do same-sex marriage.
A year and a half ago, May 2017,
Yeah.
They said within 2 years you must legalize same-sex marriage or somehow come up with total equality for same-sex couples.
So while the government was dragging its rear on this and not getting down to business on it, they passed some new law about referenda, and the right-wing religious took advantage of it and got these referenda on the ballot.
And not just the Taiwanese right-wing, but the American right-wing, because the Alliance Defending Freedom, the National Organization for Marriage, all the usual suspects got into the game and started pouring millions of dollars into Taiwan to oppose any equality for same-sex couples.
Our side also put up some referenda pro same-sex marriage, and there was another one on gay curricula, which was up there on both sides.
5 total that related to us. 3 of them were about marriage. 2 of them were about education.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, we got skunked. I mean, we lost the marriage thing. 72% opposed same-sex marriage. 61% opposed us on the curricular thing, and we just didn't get it anywhere near the votes we needed on the others. They needed 25% of the electorate to show up to pass these things, and they narrowly did.
Well, we did sort of win one of these referenda because one of the options offered on couples was a civil unions law. And that's not what we want. It's not what we want, but it passed.
Well, the point is they had to do something. The court wasn't going to let them do nothing for gay couples.
But the court said you have to have basically marriage, and people voted against marriage. They don't have to vote for it. These were advisory referenda.
So we lost.
But we
can still go to court and say to the Constitutional Court, hey, and these are advisory referenda.
As I just said, but the issue is that the government is going to propose probably a civil unions law because that's what people voted for. And then we're going to have to decide whether to go to the court and ask for full marriage rights as opposed to the civil unions law. And the court is going to have to decide whether or not the civil unions law is an adequate fulfillment of their order that to ban same-sex marriage is unconstitutional against the Taiwanese constitutional guarantees of equality.
Now, what I've read, and you can correct me, is that if the legislature continues to do nothing, that marriage equality goes into effect in May of 2019.
Well, that was the original scheme, but the point is that
this was not a binding referendum.
No, it wasn't. But when the government does step up, which it is much more likely to do than not, and proposes this civil union law, then what happens?
Well,
does it fulfill the court's mandate or doesn't it?
Well.
And the court could change its mind. The court could read the handwriting on the wall and decide that they would allow this to stand as the civil unions law and not mandate full marriage rights.
The government is in a bit of disarray. The president, Tsai Ing-wen, resigned as head of the party, of her party. I mean, she's still the president, but she suffered losses in local elections on this same date. She's going to remain as president. She's one of these who rejects China's claim that Taiwan is part of China.
Well, one of the reasons she lost power was because these referenda brought out the conservative voters. As in the United States in 2004, the Bush administration making sure anti-same-sex marriage votes were on the ballots in states around the country brought out conservative voters.
Yeah. I resist that interpretation. I mean,
resist away.
That is why they did it. That is why they put it on the ballot. Karl Rove wanted them on the ballot in the States.
Yes.
But it's questionable. It also can activate our side and say, hey, we're trying to protect our friends.
Well, I think we were not prepared for that, and I think
we lost most of those, almost all those referenda.
And we lost the election.
Yes, we did.
So,
narrowly.
A similar thing
Narrowly.
happened in Taiwan, and the president, in the face of all these right-wing votes on the referenda, lost some power in her party.
Better news from Bermuda.
Sure.
Now, the saga of Bermuda. The court ordered them to do same-sex marriage last year, and they had it for a while. And then the government said, we don't like this, and we're going to do civil unions. So they did. They became the first national government in the world to repeal, essentially, same-sex marriage. California voters did it as well, but and then it was restored. So then our side went back to court again and have been winning. And the latest win was at their court of appeal. And the only appeal that the government still has, if they want to try to stop marriage equality, is to go to the Privy Council in London, because they're part of the Commonwealth. And the Court of Appeal said, you can't have a stay on this. You got to start doing it again. You got to start doing same-sex marriage again. Now, the twist on this is that the lawyers for the plaintiffs in this case, who are suing for same-sex marriage, said that they found a new way to go for it on the grounds of freedom of conscience. And the lawyer said this was a revolutionary approach, and it could be used elsewhere, including in the Cayman Islands, which is going to hear a case in February.
This is as opposed to relying on specific non-discrimination laws for sexual orientation.
The Bermuda Constitution does not protect sexual orientation, but the law does. But the Constitution protects freedom of conscience, and that's how they argued this case.
The United States does not nationally protect sexual orientation, non-discrimination, except maybe in an interpretation we're still waiting for of Title VII or Title IX. And the decision of the marriage case in the Supreme Court, the Obergefell decision, did not rely on a sexual orientation non-discrimination law. It relied on equal protection and due process and things like that.
And other things that John Roberts didn't like.
Well, we'll see where he stands in the future.
Yes.
All right, so that's Taiwan and Bermuda. Good news on Bermuda, bad news on Taiwan. Mexico, the Supreme Court there decided that same-sex couples can use assisted reproduction and both be designated as parents of a child of that process. That's good news.
Should we go back to domestic news and then go back to international news?
Oh, I see. I was about to go through all the marriage news internationally. Sure.
Okay.
My mistake.
That's all right.
Trump.
All right. Well, before we get to, of course, he pinch hit for Cindy Hyde-Smith, and she still has holds the distinction of being, and this is a dubious distinction, the most racist senator in the United States.
I would argue that.
Who would you pick?
There are so many to choose from.
She's more overt in her Confederate
I don't
outfits.
know. Well, sure, but I think a lot of them have said some very racist things. Anyway, Trump's big move this last week was against, again, transgender people in the military. Now that he's got the Supreme Court packed the way he wants, and he's railing against things like the Ninth Circuit, he wants to leave.
And railing against John Roberts.
Well, that too, but he's trying, and we'll see how much good that does him when he tries to get decisions from Roberts. He's now trying to leapfrog the lower courts and go directly to his packed Supreme Court to get them to lift the injunctions against his proposed ban on trans people.
There are 4 courts that have issued injunctions and have said that this trans-military ban thing is no good, and he wants to bypass the intermediate appeals, especially in the Ninth Circuit.
Now, I'm concerned about one thing. The reporting on this item I thought was a little light, because I didn't see any mention of the fact that trans people are serving currently in the military, and that everything he's done has not stopped that. And
everything, except the way they're dragging their tails on letting people into the military who are transgender, and making all kinds of objections to them.
Yes, but people are still enlisting.
Technically under the law, but they are making their lives miserable.
So let's be clear. The Williams Institute estimates there are 15,000 plus trans people serving in the military.
Most of them not out.
Oh, absolutely, but they're there. And Trump, with all his maneuvering, has not succeeded in getting rid of any of them yet. And they are serving happily and honorably, and this is all nonsense. Right. And I suspect he is not going to succeed in his attempt to leapfrog the regular system.
And then there's the Office of Personnel Management. They have now removed the Obama guidance on gender identity, and they say that they are saying that gender-specific jobs in federal government should be assigned according to biological sex. Now, what jobs are they talking about here?
I don't know, but they also have put in some general statement of non-discrimination.
Well, they've left the Obama executive order on LGBT in place, but they're doing everything they can to sort of undermine it.
Absolutely. The gender identity guidance page was all about how to support and protect transgender workers, and that is now gone from their website.
And then there's all the stuff going on at the border. Of course, this was the week that they approved lethal force at the border, and we read more about the transgender asylum seeker who died at the border, Roxana Hernandez Rodriguez. 33
years old, trans woman from Honduras. Had been in and out of the United States several times.
And had been gang raped by MS-13 in Honduras. Mm-hmm. So she essentially died. Well, she had HIV, she was dehydrated, they kept moving her around in May to various places. She was, shackled, she had bruises.
The original government autopsy said that she had died of complications of HIV and dehydration. But then her representatives commissioned a second autopsy, and the news is that they found these bruises and evidence of her having been beaten in, they're saying, in ICE custody. Now, in fact, this is a private prison system where she was being kept. And so between ICE and the private prison system, she was beaten to death.
Yes.
And that has been revealed just by this outside second autopsy.
So the advocates are suing the government. Always a tough thing to do, but they're trying to.
The Transgender Law Center is suing.
Yes.
And I'm happier with the coverage of this. I'm surprised at the extent to which this has been covered in major media all over the place.
Well, and then you all saw the famous picture of the children, toddlers, being gassed at the border. I mean, this picture has been all over the world and is absolutely appalling. And But it was nice to see this week that anti-government militia leader Eamon Bundy condemned the Trump administration for their treatment of immigrants and said the people opposing this are just being selfish, he said. Eamon Bundy.
Wait a minute, the people opposing what?
Opposing immigration. Are being selfish. I mean, it's no skin off.
Well, they're being very short-sighted because if we don't continue to enrich the population of the United States with immigration, this country is going to shrivel and die much quicker.
It's certainly happening right now before our eyes.
Well, also on the border, that's a segue, in Tucson, Arizona, a widower, Michael Eli, 65 years old, has, represented by Lambda Legal, is filing for Social Security survivors benefits. He was married to his partner, James Taylor. They were together for 43 years, and as soon as marriage became legal in Arizona in 2014, they got married within 3 weeks after legalization. But then James died 6 months later. But you can only get survivor's benefits if you've been married for 9 months. 9 months. And so Social Security turned him down. Now, the late husband was the prime breadwinner for the family. And so getting his survivor benefits is extremely important. And so Michael is now suing and saying, we were together for 43 years. We weren't allowed to get married.
There are a number of these cases working their way through the courts. I mean, there was even the case of that guy who had a commitment ceremony who was ordered by the court to pay a divorce settlement many years later from somebody he broke up with 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We'll see how this all plays out.
And in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, firefighter Scott Phillips Gartner, 55 years old, is suing the city. He was a firefighter for many years. He married his boyfriend 4 years ago when he was 51. And he then was incredibly harassed, demoted from his job, transferred to some hinterland, and really forced to resign. So he is now suing the city of Norfolk for that kind of treatment.
I had a couple of other Trump notes. One of them is bad, of course. It looks like Thomas Farr, the North Carolina bigot who's up for a federal judge, is going to go through, even if Flake doesn't vote for him. Susan Collins spent time with him and was reassured. Now, this guy worked with Jesse Helms on voter suppression. He goes way back, and he's been doing a lot of stuff in the last decade as well.
Yep.
So Mike Pence would have to break a tie to get him through. So that's the bad news. And, people have told us lately, it's very hard to listen to all this stuff. It's very depressing. But I want you to think about the fact that when the Democrats take power in the House in January, there are 5 House committees that are going to investigate Betsy DeVos. And among them is Maxine Waters, who's going to go after her for violations of civil rights, including of transgender rights, and Mark Takano, the out-gay representative from California, who's going to look at how she derailed the benefits of tens of thousands of military veterans.
We lost a fundamentally important activist this week, Ray Hill from Houston. He died at 78. He was a legendary activist. Now, he was a teen evangelist, a jewel thief who went to prison for 4 years, and then came out and started a radio show called The Prison Show. He was absolutely legendary for his support of people in prison. He went to the Supreme Court to fight for his right to yell at cops who were harassing people, and he won. That was a fundamentally important decision. He was known as a citizen provocateur. In 1977, he got involved with a fight against Anita Bryant, who was trying to get rid of us.
And she was successful in the first referendum against LGBT rights in Florida.
In 1978, he and others convened something called Town Meeting 1 in Houston. And that was the big organizing meeting for the LGBT community in Houston. Many organizations came out of that, and it was...
and he was very involved in the marches on Washington. Washington,
Yeah.
and at one of them, I think it had to be the '87 march. He organized a national LGBT Congress while we were down there for the March on Washington. He's very serious about democratizing the movement and making it national.
He hung out with Harvey Milk, with Edward Albee, with Tennessee Williams. He said his parents, when he was young, he was very well dressed, and his parents were very afraid he would grow up to be a Republican. And they were very relieved when he told them, no, I'm not a Republican, I'm gay.
He was quite a character, a lovely guy, and I just remember him. This is not particularly gay. I remember him. We all went out to a Chinese restaurant together after a meeting, and he just says to the owner of the place, "We each have $6. Do your best." And bring us. He didn't order anything. He said.
So they made a documentary about him called "The Trouble with Ray." And we have an excerpt from it that has some wonderful stories in it, so we wanted to share that with you.
Hello there. I'm George Putnam. I'd like to begin with a fact, a simple yet shocking fact. It is this: a flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity and is threatening to pervert an entire generation of our American children. We know that once a person is perverted, it is practically impossible for that person to adjust to normal attitudes in regard to sex.
I came out in the late 50s, and I got away with everything, but I made damn sure that everybody knew that I was gay. And since I talked about it, it wasn't so much a weapon they could use in my presence. Everybody said it was courage. The courage to be honest. But I think that the line between courage and insanity or madness or stupidity might not be very thick. My official name is Raymond Wayne Hill, not a junior. I was born in Baptist Memorial Hospital, which was across the street from City Hall, which was a very clairvoyant address. I spent half my career demonstrating in front of the building across the street from where I was born.
Do you think that homosexuality should be legalized completely a la Illinois?
Definitely, definitely.
Would you ever marry a girl who had been a homosexual?
Yeah, I think it would be more interesting.
In the old days, the cops would come in, and out of habit, everybody would hit either the bar or the wall. So all of the patrons would be like in a lineup. People just wince when I say this. But to the gay movement, the bars were what the churches were to black movement. It was the only institution they would let us have. And so as long as we were contained in bars, they didn't have to worry about the lobbies of their banks and their desks in their law firms and their hospitals. But that also made us easy targets. Now, Rita Wannstrom owned a bar over on Shepherd Street. The name of the bar was the Roaring 60s. And Rita Wannstrom was a great big old raw-bone Scandinavian lesbian. Her nickname was Papa Bear, if that draws an image. Okay. And so Papa Bear called me, and what was happening is Officer Murphy of the Vice Squad, his wife left him for a big lesbian by the name of Big Seal. Well, we all knew Big Seal. And he, being the lieutenant in the Vice Squad, raided the lesbian bars to kind of get even. So the cops would come in and arrest every woman in the bar who had pants with zippers or buttons in the front. If the zipper was on the side, you were all right. If the zipper was in the back, you were all right. But if the zipper was in the front, that was perceived by the police officers to be cross-dressing. So when the cops would come in, all of the women would go to the women's room and turn their pants around. I don't know if you've seen a herd of lesbians with Levi's on backwards, but it is not a pretty sight. But the difference between having your buttons or zipper in the front or in the back means you go to jail. Your name gets printed in the Houston Post and the Houston Chronicle the next day. Your family, to whom you may be closeted, all of a sudden is deserting you. Your job, I don't care how much education you've got, all of a sudden your life is destroyed. And it is not infrequent that people commit suicide after getting picked up in a bar for doing nothing wrong.
Having to lie, I feel, is the saddest and the ugliest part of being a homosexual. When you have your first bad love experience, for instance, and you can't go to your brother or your sister and say, I'm hurting.
We haven't always thought about gay people like we do today. We think a lot differently about that, and you're welcome. I'm glad to have played a role in that. I certainly didn't do that by myself. And I've made so many damn fool mistakes that I could talk about those, but I don't, because I get to write this script. And if you get to write the script, you have every right to be the hero. And I am the one queer ex-convict you will meet in your lifetime who grew up to be who his mother intended him to be. And there's just no question about that.
Ray Hill, 78. There will be a funeral memorial service for him on the steps of City Hall in Houston this Sunday at 2 p.m. Anise Parker regarded him as her mentor.
A true pioneer.
Yeah.
True pioneer.
Now, a pioneering moment happened at the Thanksgiving Day parade this
It's hard to believe it's 2018, but you know they showed a scene from the musical The Prom, which I have been promoting as the best musical on Broadway, and they actually showed the scene where the two women, young women, at the prom kiss. And this was, considered a breakthrough. The right wing went nuts, said that millions of small children were exposed to this, but most of the people just enjoyed it.
Well, it turns out the Thanksgiving Day Parade has an enormous audience. It's one of the highest rated shows of the year.
What else is there to do? While you're cooking the turkey and things, you watch the Thanksgiving. I got to watch it in person for the first time in my life this year.
I went years ago. I haven't been lately. So,
but this was not the first liberation of the parade. That would have been back in 2003 when Harvey Fierstein, who was doing Hairspray at the time and playing Edna Turnblad.
On Broadway.
Yes, which he wrote also. The book of, he played Mrs. Claus, and this was quite controversial. And in conjunction with that...
Was that in place of the usual Santa Claus at the end of the parade?
I'm not sure if they had Santa in there as well, but in anticipation of this, Harvey drafted, and they published in the New York Times, an op-ed piece that he wrote saying that what if Santa was gay? And he talked about this for the New York Times.
The gay rights movement in America basically was won back in the 70s when the American Psychiatric Association finally stopped calling gay people a disease. And as soon as we were seen as a civil rights movement, that was the change. We were not just a person here, a person there, these deviants. It was, this isn't a legitimate minority. The war was won, in my opinion, and then it's these little battles. I was doing a show called Hairspray. I was playing on Broadway, playing Edna Turnblad. I was playing a heterosexual woman, a married heterosexual woman with children. So Edna was somebody who got around and became a sort of character all on her own. Along came the wonderful institution Macy's asking if I would be in the Thanksgiving Day Parade as Edna. I mean, since I was a little kid, I wanted to be in the Thanksgiving Day Parade. I wanted to hold one of the balloons. I'd be one of the clowns. I mean, never thought I'd actually ride on a float. I mean, that was like, and they said, you will ride on a float and you will sing a song and you will be dressed as Mrs. Santa Claus. And I went, whoa. So it wasn't Harvey Fierstein as Mrs. Santa Claus. It was indeed Harvey Fierstein playing Edna, who's dressed as Mrs. Santa Claus. And then it occurred to me, what if someone as beloved as St. Nicholas turned out to be gay? I mean, that's even bigger than Ellen DeGeneres or Elton John or any of those people. And I thought, would the world turn against this person, and it seemed like a perfect subject for a op-ed piece. So I wrote it. So I wrote a piece and I sent it to the Times a couple of weeks before the parade. But of course the Times held it until just before the parade because it wouldn't be news otherwise, would it? All of a sudden the phone started ringing and all that, and all these people asking, is Macy's making a political statement or all that? And there's a difference between Harvey writing in the Times and, they were two different events. One was that I was going to ride in the parade. That's purely entertainment. One was that I wrote an op-ed piece. I didn't expect to marry the two things together. On that morning, I was certainly asked about it, and that was fine. I wasn't there, I wasn't in the Macy's Day Parade to make a political statement. I was saying, what if? And that was the point of that article. What if Santa Claus was gay? Would his image be torn down? Would you get rid of that man in the red suit? Would you do all of that? What would happen? Probably the truth is they'd just go into denial, like with everybody else. And Santa Claus, I don't know. Look at this suit. You telling me he's straight?
Quite the controversy at the time.
I think people would accept Santa as gay these days, but I agree with him. I think some people would just be in denial
Santa
about
Claus
it.
isn't gay. Santa Claus is white. What was that? Megyn Kelly?
Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Anyway, cute.
Anyway, well, all right. Back to the bad news. In Boston, we told you that somebody was making threatening phone calls to gay bars there, saying he was going to shoot up the bars. Well, an unnamed 16-year-old from New Hampshire has been arrested in the case. He's got a bunch of outstanding warrants, so he's being held as a fugitive from justice. But the manager of the Alley Bar, which was one of them, Rocco LaMonica, told the Boston Herald nobody wants to prosecute someone and ruin someone's life. He hopes he will see that we're not the enemy and they'll see that it's okay to be who you are. Well, okay, but
We just used to call places and say, is your refrigerator running? We better go catch it.
we used to, well, we could go
Whatever.
on. You have Prince Albert in a can?
Yeah, I know.
All right.
And let him out. And in Houston, there was a lovely pride mural on the side of a noodle house, and someone has vandalized that.
The theme of the mural was "Be Visible," and it was part of a National Pride Portraits campaign.
Yeah.
But do we have that picture?
The picture of the vandalized mural.
Well, I do want to say something. Can we do? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
But note what it says. It says, please stop your gay agenda. So are bigots becoming more polite? They're saying, please now?
They are going to repaint the mural soon, and I think it was actually a lovely mural.
When they put up the Stonewall statues in Sheridan Square, a lesbian couple and a gay couple, people said it's going to be a constant source of vandalism. I said, better they go after the statues than they go after us. But I don't remember them ever being vandalized.
I think there was a little vandalism, but nothing major. It's the George Segal statues. People got more upset of the fact that they were white paint,
and that
glaring white paint.
And they look like white people.
Yeah.
And Craig Rodwell of the Usquebaugh Bookshop will post them. All right. In New York, there's going to be a memorial service for David McReynolds, the gay peace activist and socialist candidate for president. It's going to be, we have a picture of him there. Yeah. He's the tall guy. It's going to be on December 1st at the Judson Memorial Church there on Washington Square South, December 1st at noon.
Noon to 3 p.m. on Saturday. And next Wednesday, here's the big event. The Reclaim Pride Town Hall meeting, Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m., December 5th. This is the meeting where we're going to get everybody together to start getting really detailed about our organization for the march, the Stonewall 50 March for Human Rights and Social Justice that we're going to hold next June. I think we're really gaining momentum on this. I think it's going to be huge. Lots of people are starting to get involved and come on board.
Full disclosure, we're involved.
We've made that clear all along. But if you want to hear more about the organizing of this, start joining a committee to get some stuff done. There are lots of different things to do.
And if you don't feel like coming to New York...
Wait, let me just give them the details.
Oh, sure.
The Reclaim Pride Town Hall meeting, Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m. at the People's Forum, 320 West 37th Street. We meet there every Wednesday night, but the town hall meeting next week is going to be a big one.
Between 8th and 9th Avenues. But one of the things we're emphasizing here, if you're hearing us all over the world, have a march on June 30th, the last Sunday in June, in your town.
Yes.
Commemorating the Stonewall, celebrating the Stonewall. And
fighting for the fights we need to fight today and tomorrow.
Right. This should be, I mean, we know you all have pride marches, most of you have pride marches right down to your little towns. But on June 30th, we should all be out marching across the world.
For Stonewall 50.
Does this sound a little grandiose? Well, this is what we think we need to do as an international movement. You hear every week about it.
If you build it, they will come.
Yes, you do. Yes, they will. All right. We should note that November 27th, yesterday, was 40 years since Harvey Milk was assassinated in San Francisco, and Mayor Moscone. They had their annual candlelight walk there in Harvey Milk Plaza to City Hall.
Okay.
All right. In Rider University in New Jersey, the school removed Chick-fil-A from a survey of restaurants the students might want to have there.
They're very Christian, and they like to donate to anti-LGBT organizations.
I will skip those other things. I will also note that in California, in Nevada County, they have their first female sheriff, but it's also the first out gay or lesbian sheriff in the whole state of California. Shannon Moon, 50 years old, who worked in the department for 28 years, was elected sheriff, and she has been out since high school.
Congratulations. All right, international news.
Yes.
In Hong Kong, the Legislative Council, by a narrow vote of 27 to 24, rejected equal rights for same-sex couples.
In China last week, we told you about the novelist who was sentenced to 10 years for putting a gay sex scene in her novel. 10 years. Well, now the government is offering $86,500 rewards for snitching on people who publish pornography. The government is also stepping up raids on publishers, bookstores, and internet cafes to find illegal content.
In Northern Ireland, the court decision on marriage equality has been postponed till next year. And in Costa Rica, marriage for same-sex couples will become a reality in May of 2020 because they just finally finalized the decision. The rule says it takes effect in 18 months, or the government can do something sooner.
Back to China for a second. Dolce & Gabbana, those miserable creatures, had to publicly apologize to China for a series of racist promo videos for their fashion show in Shanghai, which had to be canceled over this because it was so toxic. They, of course, had to apologize when they said that gay people shouldn't be parents. These are gay people who said this. So,
well, as long as we're in China, in another story from Hong Kong, a married gay man is suing for housing rights and benefits that are available to opposite-sex couples.
In the United Kingdom, they're debating a gender recognition law to streamline the process of changing your birth certificate.
In New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand, the Pride Parade there is in an uproar because police officers in uniform have been banned from the Pride Parade. And the police, the army, major corporate sponsors are pulling out of the parade. The parade organizers say the police don't respect LGBT people enough. That LGBT people are uncomfortable around too many cops. Now, in Minneapolis, in Toronto, in London, they have banned cops in uniform from the Pride parades. It's a controversy currently in New York for next year. It has been for a couple of years.
Well, the Heritage of Pride Committee just insists that, everybody can march. We're having a civil rights march where I don't think uniformed officers are going to be allowed
We're
to
happy
participate. We're happy to have people who happen to be cops, but I don't think police officers are allowed to march in demonstrations.
Well, maybe not, but it's a big controversy in New Zealand. In Russia, the European Court of Human Rights says that Russian courts have been wrong to reject request to hold pride parades. We'll see whether Russia respects the European Court of Human Rights. But meanwhile, their customs officials have been seizing copies of Masha Gessen's book, The Future is History, How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia, which won the National Book Award here in the United States, but is not making it through customs in Russia.
Chile, President Sebastián Piñera signed a bill to let trans people over 14 update their legal documents according to their true gender. And this really gives me hope, because this was a fascist country under Pinochet, and now look how far they've come. So maybe we will overcome our fascist period and have a period of opening and liberalism
And the new
again.
president is not a liberal and has resisted legalizing same-sex marriage. So this is notable that he's signed this transgender rights law. In India, we know that they killed the sodomy ban a few months ago. So now Delhi has held its first Pride parade since that was overturned.
And it's the biggest one in a long time.
Thousands of people showed up, and it was a huge success. And I just thought this guy was so striking in his turban and pearls that was the picture I wanted to show from the Delhi Pride Parade. Such regal dignity.
Yes.
I think that sort of embodies the new spirit.
We have a lot of queens in our parade as well.
I want to wear a turban and pearls.
In Australia, a kid named Finn Stannard, a student at Tony Abbott's old Catholic high school, came out at a school assembly and was given a standing ovation. But the big news is it's a Catholic school, and the principal said no one chooses their orientation any more than they choose their eye color. We're very proud of him. That's progress.
And progress in Guyana.
We'll include a link to that tape in our email.
We told you that the court in Guyana had struck the anti-cross-dressing law, public cross-dressing. Well, the president of Guyana has applauded that decision and says that he wants to institute robust education campaigns about LGBT human rights. He wants
Fantastic.
that publicly all over the country. That would be fantastic.
I'm not sure what kind of education is needed here, but Gareth Thomas, he's a rugger, isn't he?
Yes, rugby player.
He was
retired.
He was gay bashed in Cardiff, and so
Wales.
So the teams in Wales and France were wearing rainbow laces in support of him. A 16-year-old boy, another 16-year-old, was arrested for this and for the bashing. But some of the England players.
But that's who does most of the bashing, is teenage and early 20s guys of all kinds. Racist bashing, gay bashing.
The guy who shot up the synagogue was not 16.
I said most.
All right.
Most.
Okay. But some of the players, the England players, won't wear them. They said we're not anti-gay, they're too thick, they're too long, and they're uncomfortable.
But a Mexican couple living in New York are the first same-sex couple allowed to marry at the Mexican consulate here in New York.
Yep.
They got a special ruling to allow them to do so.
This happened in New York City.
Yeah, and there they are getting married. Congratulations to them.
The German Cardinal Gerhard Müller, not the Mueller that we have, he blames a mafia-like homosexual network for the Catholic Church's scandals, says the church underestimates the moral depravity of homosexual acts among adults, and also blames creeping atheism in the church. Atheism in the church, what an idea. All right, AIDS news?
Yes.
Okay. It is World AIDS Day, December 1st, and there are
Saturday,
activities all across the globe.
There are. Let me mention a few in New York because that's what we know about because we're here. And in fact, the LGBT Community Center here is starting on Friday, November 30th, the day before the official day, with a commemoration event in the afternoon from 4 to 7 p.m., a celebration of people living with the virus. They're offering free HIV testing conducted by the Mount Sinai Adolescent Program, and a lot of organizations that offer services to people living with HIV are going to show up and inform people about the services. So that's Friday, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Community Center.
And then on World AIDS Day itself, since we do have an AIDS memorial now on 7th Avenue at 12th Street, at 4:30 they're going to have something called Light the Fight. with projections by Jenny Holzer, or LED projections on trucks. These trucks is going to start there. There's going to be some, performances
ceremony,
and things like that. And then these trucks are going to go all over the city with the quotes about AIDS
5
worldwide.
trucks. You should see the list of corporate sponsors for that.
Wow.
Huge. And then a little later, at 6 o'clock at the AIDS Memorial, they start the 27th Out of the Darkness event. There's a vigil, a candlelight vigil at the memorial there on 12th Street and 7th Avenue. And then there's a procession to St. John's Church on Christopher Street, 81 Christopher Street, where they're going to be reading the names of people who've died and have performers and speakers. So that's 6:30 on Saturday at St. John's on Christopher Street.
And at the SVA Theater down the block from us at 7:30 on West 23rd Street, 333. There are alternate endings, activist risings from visual aids for the day.
Short films.
For the day without art.
Yeah. So that's 7:30 at the SVA Theater. Now,
and the Trump administration's present for World AIDS Days is to not publicize the fact that if you want to sign up for the ACA again this year, we've shortened the time period you can do it on the federal registry for the ACA. It now expires on December 15th. So if you need the federal website, you've got to do it by December 15th. If you want to sign up for the ACA in a place like New York, we have our own marketplace, and you can do it until January 31st. But so pay attention to this because your health insurance is at risk.
Well, the other thing they're doing is, you know how they promised to cut the prices of prescription drugs? Well, they're going to do it with Medicare by reducing the number of drugs available on the formularies so that, and this is particularly hurtful to people with HIV because people are so different in the drugs that work for them, so you need a wide range of drugs available. But they're only going to make a few drugs available, and on the grounds that that'll be cheaper. But this is not something that people are crazy
It's
about.
about killing us off.
Well, Carl Schmidt from the AIDS Institute says the Trump administration proposal is bad medicine, dangerous to people living with HIV. Not all HIV medications are the same. The Medicare Part D program is working well for people with HIV, and there is no reason to take these draconian actions.
Other than they hate us.
And, whatever.
Well, a new report out about gay or bisexual teen boys using PrEP. Awareness has risen quite a bit in the last few years. It's up to 55% now. And it is covered by insurance, but of course, a lot of teen boys don't want to say to their parents, I want to get on PrEP. And that's under your insurance. So, and if you want to pay for it yourself, it can be $2,000 a month. So there has been no real national campaign on teenagers and PrEP and getting them on it the way there has been for some other things.
Well, and there's a slow climb for everyone else too. And then there's this crazy story out of China, this scientist who claims he edited a gene in an embryo to prevent HIV transmission from an infected father to the child he was conceiving with the mother, and everybody's up in arms because they said, oh, this is malpractice and you're tinkering with nature and you didn't have to do it in this case because there are other ways to prevent HIV transmission, and now no one even knows whether he's telling the truth about what he did. It's crazy. We'll keep an eye on it.
He was literally called crazy by some of the other scientists.
So, should we, do you think we have time to run this tape? All right. So the Zero Project, run by Sean Strube and others, is a great project, mostly about criminalization of HIV. And they hold an annual conference called We the Positive Summit, held this year in Jackson, Mississippi. And out of it, they made this tape that was people with HIV talking about their experience with the virus. And it's called Sing Your Song, People Living with HIV Networks Change Lives.
It's like one of the biggest things right now because I haven't told my parents, my auntie, my uncle. Those are like the closest people in my life, and I haven't told not one of those people. So I'm kind of like trying to educate myself to like prepare.
Why are we here? To learn about HIV and how it can affect you.
What I'm saying is, if it's an issue for you, it might be an issue for somebody else. So bring it up.
That's good. I was diagnosed in 1996.
I remember my mom having more bleach than the Family Dollar store. But then as the years got going and I got to finding out about what my virus is, and I can live. I can live and not die. It made me want to go and sing my song.
Being in a support group, that's trust. You can feel it. Everyone there has basically the same thing. They may have different strands, they may be taking different meds, but y'all all in there for the same thing.
I want to make sure you have the tools to be able to do that effectively.
We share information. And with the information that I get from out the network, I take it and I use it. Because I mean, people out here need to know, what can I do to stop this thing right now?
When you're serving people and you see the difference in those people, you know, that, for me, that's the greatest thing in doing a mentorship.
I'm just used to being that person everybody leans on. And like coming out with something as big as being HIV positive, I don't know how it may go. Like everybody may lean away, everybody may just move completely away.
It's so strange to me that as good as things are medically and people are living longer and all that, social stigma against people with HIV is rising. How do I open up about that which is the most challenging thing in me, and that is that I'm living with HIV? How do I take that and turn it out? Being involved with other people living with HIV, that's what does it for me.
The one voice makes you look like you're just crazy, and you're just angry, and you're just permanently damaged. But two voices begins then to have a totally different tone about it. And 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 voices standing in the same public forum that has to do with HIV suddenly has a powerful voice.
How would you feel if your child was taken from you?
No, how
if
would
your
you feel
child
if your daughter
was
was
a
a
thing?
Would you vote, Senator Whitaker, to expand our Medicaid?
Well, why?
Look at us.
No, I'm not.
You know what?
No.
Okay, well, you won't get our vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, let me find this word. It gives me hope. It gives me hope that maybe someday that this too shall pass. It gives me hope that it could save the life of somebody. It gives me hope that, you know, it don't have to go any further.
I didn't know my purpose before I had HIV. HIV kind of brought something out of me. Gave me this sense of I can make a difference and my voice is powerful. It woke me up.
Two years ago, this wasn't me at all. I never thought I would have done anything pertaining to HIV. Not once. And now I'm just overwhelmed with just wanting to learn more. If I could do this every week, I would. And that's where I'm at right now. I want it to be known.
Very brave people and very positive.
Wonderful to see their blossoming and their joy in their own lives and in knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
And the South is the epicenter of the AIDS pandemic in the United States.
It is. So let's move on to entertainment news.
Well, you all have a chance to see Katie Lang, December 14th. She's going to be on Great Performances doing her Landmarks live concert there. And then they're going to stream it as well. She's going to do her album Ingenue from 25 years ago at the Majestic Theater in San Antonio. So check that out.
Yeah, including things like Constant Craving, the big hit from that album. I noticed the death of Bernardo Bertolucci, and what that brought up for me was The Conformist from 1970. I was just out of college, living in Washington, D.C. I went to see it, I think, by myself, and I was so overwhelmed by the lesbian scene with Dominique Sanda and Stefania Sandrelli. I thought Dominique Sanda was about the most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen. And of course, they say that Jean-Louis Trintignant, as the star, was supposed to be a closeted person. The Conformist.
Great director, great director.
Yeah.
Chris Cooper seconds Rob Shooter's endorsement of The Favorite,
which was a big winner at the Gotham Awards, the first movie awards.
Well, Chris calls it awesome body, deliciously off-kilter, sad, funny, and lesbianic.
Oh, that's the whole point of it.
Bill and Hillary Clinton went to see Torch Song Trilogy, got a standing ovation from the audience. Of course, they are preempting Lucas Knoth's play on Broadway next year called Hillary and Clinton, with John Lithgow and Laurie Metcalf as them in March.
Our friend Rachel Lipstein, who's sat in here a couple of times, has written about the trans men's bodybuilding documentary, Man Made, which you can, for The New Yorker, quite an extensive piece. And you can see that on December 12th at the Community Center here. It's a New Fest event.
Young singer Shawn Mendes took to YouTube to clarify that he's not gay, but it shouldn't matter, and we'll include the link. It's a short video. We'll send it with our email. Just sign up for our email by going to our website, gayusatv.org.
But our picture of the week comes from our guest last week, Rob Shooter, who does the naughtygossip.com website. Now, keep this up here. In the middle, Barry Manilow, on the High Line here in New York. On the left, his assistant, Mark Hewlett. On the right, Rob Shooter's husband, Bruce Sussman, who is the songwriting partner of Barry Manilow. They wrote Copacabana together. So they're all hanging around at Rob and Bruce's apartment, Barry and Mark. And Barry says, I'd like to go up on the High Line. Is it too busy up there?
It's very busy. Nobody goes there anymore.
Rob says, oh, no one goes there. So they go up on the High Line like that, and within 15 minutes, he says, there are tourist buses and locals singing Copacabana.
Only in New York, kids, only in New York. See you next week.
Thank you for the story, Rob.